You have been working toward one moment your entire adult life, not a promotion, not a vacation, not a car, a home, your home. Four walls and a roof that belonged to you and nobody else. You saved for years. You skipped the trips your friends went on. You drove the old car for 2 more years when everyone said, buy a new one. You packed lunches instead of eating out. You said no to things over and over again because you had a goal. And then one ordinary Tuesday morning, you get a phone call, and the person on the other end says 3 words that change everything. Your loan is approved. You hang up the phone and you cry. Right there, standing in your kitchen, you cry like a child. Because you did it. You actually did it. The day you get the keys, you just stand in the empty living room for a moment and breathe. Your kids run through the hallways screaming and laughing. Your partner squeezes your hand. Someone orders pizza. Someone else puts on music too loud. And for one perfect evening, everything is exactly right. And then, 3 days later, the doorbell rings. A woman is standing there. She's holding a clipboard. She is smiling. And before you can even say hello, she says, "Welcome to the neighborhood. Just so you know, you are already in violation." That was day 1 with Margaret. What came after was 2 years of the most exhausting, infuriating, and, at times, genuinely frightening experience of our lives. What came after almost took our home from us. Almost broke our marriage. Almost broke us completely. But it did not. And today, I am going to tell you every single detail of what happened. Stay with me, because this story has a very satisfying ending. Let me set the scene properly because context matters here. We moved into our home on a Saturday in April. It was one of those perfect spring days where the sky is so blue it almost looks fake. We had 2 kids, our daughter Lily, who was 8 at the time, and our son Jake, who had just turned 6. We had a dog named Biscuit who had never been allowed inside an apartment but was about to have an entire yard for the first time in his life. We had boxes stacked in every room. We had a moving truck still parked in the driveway. We had absolutely no idea what was coming. The doorbell rang at 2:47 in the afternoon. I remember the time specifically because I checked my phone when I heard it, wondering if it was the pizza we had ordered. It was not the pizza. Margaret was maybe 62 or 63 years old. She was dressed like she was attending a church function, a light blue cardigan, pressed slacks, pearl, earrings, sensible shoes. She had silver hair cut short. She was carrying a clipboard with a pen attached to it by a little chain, like the kind banks used to use. And clipped to her cardigan pocket was a laminated badge that read, HOA Compliance Officer. She smiled when I opened the door. It was a practiced smile. The kind that is designed to look warm, but is actually working very hard. She introduced herself. She said she lived 4 houses down. She said, wanted to personally welcome every new family to the neighborhood because she cared deeply about the community. She handed me a thick manila envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "Your welcome packet," she said. "Everything you need to know about community standards. The HOA rules, the aesthetic guidelines, noise ordinances, landscaping requirements, parking regulations, trash and recycling schedules." I flipped through it. It was 14 pages long, 14 single-spaced pages, for a neighborhood, not a country. Then she glanced past me toward the driveway and her expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. "I do need to mention," she said, "that your moving truck has been parked in the street for ... She checked her clipboard, 47 minutes. HOA guidelines allow non-resident vehicles in the street for up to 45 minutes without a permit. You will want to either move it or obtain a temporary parking variance from the board. I stared at her. "We are actively unloading it right now," I said. "I understand," she said. "I just want to make sure you are aware of the guidelines from the start. It is so much easier that way." Then, she glanced down at our welcome mat. It was a simple one, beige with dark letters that said "Home Sweet Home." She said nothing. but she wrote something on her clipboard. And then she smiled again and said she hoped we would enjoy living here. She left. My husband came downstairs carrying a box, and I just looked at him. "Who was that?" he asked. "I have absolutely no idea," I said. "But I think we have a problem." We laughed about it that night. We told ourselves she was probably just one of those overly enthusiastic neighborhood types. We told ourselves it was nothing. We put the 14-page packet on the kitchen counter and did not open it again for 2 weeks. The first official violation notice arrived on a Wednesday, 72 hours after we had moved in. We had not even finished unpacking the kitchen. It was printed on HOA letterhead. It had our address at the top, a violation number, a description of the infraction, the applicable bylaw reference, the fine amount, and a deadline to correct the issue or appeal. The violation? Our recycling bin had been placed 2 inches beyond the designated placement zone as defined in Section 4. Paragraph 2C of the HOA Community Standards. 2 inches. The fine was $75. My husband moved the bin. We assumed it was over. It was not even close to over. The following week, we received 3 notices in a single day. 3 separate envelopes in our mailbox on a Tuesday morning. The first said our porch light bulb was producing light in a colored temperature exceeding the community standard. It cited a specific Kelvin range that apparently our warm white bulb violated. Fine, $75. The second said one of the boxwood shrubs in our front landscaping was asymmetrical in a manner inconsistent with community aesthetic standards and needed to be professionally trimmed within 14 days. Fine, $100. The third said that a children's bicycle had been observed leaning against our front porch railing for an estimated 20 minutes, and that Section 7 of the guidelines prohibited recreational equipment and personal items from being stored in any visible exterior location without board approval. Fine, $50. Jake's bike. He had left his bike on the porch for 20 minutes while he came inside for a snack. We appealed all 3. The appeals process required submitting written documentation explaining why the fine should be dismissed, along with any photographic evidence in our defense. There was a $15 administrative fee per appeal. Margaret attended every single one of our appeal hearings, in person, with her clipboard, with photographs she had taken from the street, with printed excerpts from the bylaws highlighted in 3 different colors: yellow for the rule itself, pink for the definition section, and blue for the enforcement precedent. She had printed copies for each board member. She had a copy for herself. She had a copy for us. We lost every appeal. Over the next 6 weeks, we received 11 more violation notices: the porch light, the bin, the mat, a garden hose that was improperly coiled, a package that had been left on the porch for more than 4 hours, wind chimes that exceeded the acceptable decibel limit for decorative outdoor audio elements. Wind chimes. There is a bylaw about wind chimes. And here is what we started to notice. Margaret was always watching. We would look out the front window and see her walking slowly past our house, not jogging, not walking her dog, just walking, slowly, and looking. Every couple of days, like clockwork, we started talking to our neighbors, quietly at first, and one by one, they all said some version of the same thing. "You are not the first. She does this to every new family. Just keep your head down and eventually she will move on to someone else." But here is what we noticed that our neighbors perhaps had not fully connected. Margaret never cited the homes of her close friends on the street. We had seen it ourselves. The family at the end of the block had lawn ornaments that were definitely not in any aesthetic guidelines. The couple across from Margaret had a boat parked in their driveway. An actual boat, covered in a tarp. No notices, not one. But we got fined for a hose. There is a point in every difficult situation where you go from annoyed to genuinely angry. For us, that point came on a Thursday afternoon in late June. Lily had spent the entire morning working on a chalk drawing on our driveway. She was 8 years old and completely in love with art. She had drawn a rainbow that stretched from one side of the driveway to the other, with clouds and a smiling sun and little flowers she had added along the edges. She was so proud of it that she made us come outside and look at it 3 separate times. My husband took a photo of her standing next to it with the biggest smile on her face. 2 hours later, Margaret walked past with her clipboard. She stopped. She looked at the driveway. She took photographs. She did not say a word to us. She just took photographs and walked away. The violation notice arrived the next morning. Unauthorized surface alteration. Resident applied non-permanent pigmented substance to driveway surface without prior written board approval. See Section 11, Paragraph 6A. Fine. $125. Chalk. Children's sidewalk chalk that washes away in the rain. $125 fine. That same week, Jake left his Little League participation trophy on the porch railing while he went inside to change out of his uniform. He had just come back from a game. He was 6 years old. He was proud of his trophy. Violation notice. Unauthorized decorative item displayed in exterior visible location. Decorative items require prior written board approval per Section 7, Paragraph 3. Fine. $75. We appealed both. We lost both. But the moment that changed everything, the moment I think about when people ask when I decided to stop being reasonable about this, happened on a Saturday morning. I was in the front yard with Lily just weeding the flower bed, and Lily looked up and saw Margaret standing on the sidewalk, photographing the chalk drawing she had made the day before, a new one, a unicorn this time. Lily watched her for a moment. Then she tugged my sleeve. "Mommy," she said, "why does that lady take pictures of my drawings? Does she not like them?" I did not know what to say. I told her that some people just have different rules about things. Lily was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Does she not like us?" I picked her up, I held her, and I felt something go very still and very cold inside me. My daughter was 8 years old, and she was asking me why our neighbor hated us, and I had no good answer. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the 14-page welcome packet for the first time. I read every single word. Then, I got a notebook and started writing down every violation notice we had received, every date, every fine amount, every appeal outcome. My husband sat across from me and watched. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Building a case," I said. Once I started paying real attention, I could not stop. I began talking to every neighbor I could. Not just passing hellos anymore, real conversations. I knocked on doors. I brought cookies. I sat in people's kitchens and asked them what they knew about Margaret and how the HOA worked in this neighborhood. What I found out was more than I expected. Margaret had been the HOA compliance officer for 11 years. She had essentially held the position continuously since she was first appointed, winning each re-election by running unopposed because no one wanted the job badly enough to challenge her. She ran the compliance committee with 2 friends of hers who almost always voted with her. In her 11 years, 6 families had sold their homes and moved out of the neighborhood. I talked to the people who lived next door to one of those families. They said the couple, a young family like us, had received so many fines over such a sustained period that they eventually just gave up and sold. They lost money on the sale because they were so desperate to leave. 6 families. Gone. I asked the neighbor across the street, a retired man named Gerald, who had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, about the boat in Margaret's friend's driveway. Gerald laughed. A short, tired laugh. "That boat has been there for 2.5 years, he said. "I filed a complaint myself 18 months ago. Margaret told the board she had investigated and found no violation. The boat is still there." Then I asked a question that had been nagging at me. Who actually writes the HOA rules? Who creates the bylaws? Gerald looked at me. Well, he said slowly, the board votes on them. But someone has to draft them first. Someone has to propose the language. He let that sit there. I went to the county records office. HOA, meeting minutes, and bylaw amendments are public record in our state. I requested 3 years of documents and spent an entire Saturday going through them at the kitchen table while my husband kept the kids occupied. What I found was this. Over the past 4 years, 17 new bylaw provisions had been added to the HOA guidelines. 14 of them had been proposed by Margaret personally. And those 14 provisions were the ones she was using against us and families like like the symmetries of land, color, temperature, place accoutrements of outdoor items, chalk on driveways. Every single one of those provisions was written in vague language with no clear measurement standards. There was no specific Kelvin number in the light bulb rule, just warm colored tones inconsistent with community standards. There was no measurement definition for symmetrical landscaping, just asymmetrical in a manner inconsistent with community aesthetic standards, vague on purpose, enforceable however she wanted, against whoever she wanted. Margaret had not just been abusing the rules. She had spent years quietly writing rules she could abuse. I took photographs of every page. I made copies. I put them in a folder. Now we had something real. By the time we hit the 1-year mark in our home, we had received 31 violation notices. We had paid a total of $1,850 in fines after losing most of our appeals. We had spent hundreds more on things like the asymmetrical shrub trim and replacing our porch light. We had a binder full of documents and a list of neighbors willing to speak on our behalf. We were building towards something. We just did not move fast enough because Margaret escalated first. It started with the fence. We had a wooden privacy fence along the back and side of our property. We had not installed it. It was there when we bought the house. One morning, a man knocked on our door and introduced himself as a city property inspector. He said he was responding to a formal complaint filed with the city, not the HOA, the actual municipal government, alleging that our fence was constructed 1 inch over our property line and onto city easement land. I was stunned. We had done nothing to that fence. We had not touched it. The inspection took 45 minutes. The inspector was professional and clearly a little uncomfortable. He told us the complaint had been filed anonymously, but city policy required them to investigate all formal complaints. The fence was fine, perfectly within our property. He confirmed it in writing. But to get that written confirmation, we had to hire a licensed surveyor to produce a current survey document. Cost $820 out of our pocket. 2 weeks after the fence inspection, I ran into our neighbor Carol at the end of the block. We had gotten to know Carol reasonably well by then. She was kind and a little nervous. She clearly did not want to get in the middle of anything. But she pulled me aside at the end of our conversation and said, carefully, "I heard something I thought you should know. Someone on the street has been telling people that you and your husband are planning to convert your garage into an apartment, a rental unit. I know you are not, but I thought you should know people are hearing that. We were not planning anything of the sort. We had never discussed it. We had never mentioned it to anyone. It was completely made up." I thanked Carol and went home. I sat down and thought about who would benefit from that rumor spreading. Neighbors who thought we were turning our home into a rental property would be less likely to support us. It would make us look like we were the problem. But even that was not the worst of it. 6 weeks later, we received a letter from our mortgage lender. It was formal and carefully worded, but the message was clear. They had received a written notice from a community member claiming that our property was an ongoing HOA violation, that our failure to comply was affecting surrounding property values. and that the HOA was considering pursuing forced compliance liens against our property. The letter asked us to respond and provide clarification about our compliance status within 30 days, or our loan may be subject to review. I read that letter 3 times. My hands were shaking by the end of the first read. My husband read it, set it down on the table, stood up, and punched the wall of our laundry room hard enough to leave a mark. He has never done anything like that before or since. He is not that kind of person. That is how scared we were. Because here is the thing. A mortgage lender receiving complaints about a property in ongoing violation, even unsubstantiated complaints, can trigger a loan review. And a loan review at the wrong moment, depending on how it goes, can threaten your ability to stay in your home. We did not know exactly how serious this could get, but we were terrified. We called a lawyer that same night. The attorney's name was Sandra. She had been practicing HOA and property law for over 20 years. My husband found her through a referral from one of the neighbors who had dealt with HOA issues before. She agreed to an initial consultation. We brought everything: the binder, the violation notices, the appeal outcomes, the records from the county showing Margaret's bylaw proposals, the neighbor statements, the city fence inspection report, the mortgage lender letter, all of it. Sandra spent 40 minutes going through it in silence. At the end, she set it all down and looked at us. "This," she said, "is one of the most documented cases of HOA selective enforcement and targeted harassment I have seen in a very long time." She explained what we were dealing with legally. Selective enforcement: applying rules to some homeowners, but not others based on personal relationships or bias, is a recognized legal theory in HOA law and has been successfully challenged in courts across the country. The vague bylaw language that Margaret had written gave her broad discretion, but that same vagueness could be challenged as unenforceable when applied inconsistently. The mortgage lender contact was a more serious matter. Contacting a homeowner's lender with false or misleading information about violations could constitute tortious interference and potentially defamation, depending on the state. Sandra recommended a 3-part strategy. Sandra sent a formal cease and desist letter to Margaret personally, not to the HOA. To Margaret as an individual, outlining the specific actions she had taken, identifying them as harassment and selective enforcement, and demanding that all contact with us, our neighbors, about us, and any external parties such as our lender cease immediately. Our state has a regulatory body that oversees HOA governance. Sandra filed a formal complaint with them on our behalf, attaching all documentation. The complaint alleged selective enforcement, abuse of officer authority, and tortious interference with our mortgage relationship. We requested a formal item on the agenda of the next HOA board meeting. We had the right to address the board as homeowners. We requested 30 minutes. We showed up with Sandra. Margaret was already seated at the compliance committee table when we walked in. She looked at our lawyer and her expression did not change, but something in her posture did. Over the next 25 minutes, Sandra walked the board through everything: the 31 notices, the selective enforcement evidence, specific addresses, specific violations that existed and were never cited, the bylaw amendment history showing Margaret's authorship of the vaguest rules, the city fence complaint, the mortgage lender letter. The boardroom was completely silent. When Sandra finished, one of the board members, a woman named Patricia, who had been on the board for 7 years, said, "I want to be clear. I was not aware of the contact with the mortgage lender. I was not aware of the city complaint. I was not aware of the scope of what has been described here tonight." She looked directly at Margaret. "This is not what this HOA is for." The board voted to remove Margaret from the position of compliance officer. The vote was 7-1. The one vote in favor of keeping her was her own. When the result was read aloud, Margaret stood up from her chair. She told the board they were making a terrible mistake. She called 3 of them by name and said they were traitors to everything the community stood for. Then she picked up her clipboard, that same clipboard, and she walked out. The room was quiet for a moment, and then one by one, people started to clap. Not loudly, not mockingly, just relieved, genuinely relieved. Neighbors we had not even met yet were clapping. Margaret did not accept the board's decision quietly, of course. 3 weeks after the meeting, we were served with a defamation lawsuit. She claimed that the information we had presented to the board had damaged her reputation in the community and caused her emotional distress. Sandra filed a motion to dismiss. The lawsuit was thrown out in 61 days. The judge found no basis for the claims. The following spring, Margaret ran for a seat on the HOA board. She campaigned door to door. She had flyers. She gave a speech at the annual meeting about her years of dedicated service to the community. She received 3 votes out of 47 cast. One of them was presumably her own. The HOA board, to their credit, moved quickly after the meeting. They hired a neutral third-party property manager to handle compliance going forward. They also reviewed and amended several of the vague bylaws Margaret had written, giving them clearer language and objective measurement standards. And they approved a refund of $2,200 to us, representing the fines they agreed had been issued without proper basis. The new compliance officer is a retired schoolteacher named Donna. In 10 months, she has issued exactly 0 violation notices. The neighborhood looks the same. Nothing has fallen apart. It turns out that most reasonable people, when left alone, take care of their own homes just fine. Lily still draws chalk art on the driveway. Last week, she did an entire solar system. It took her 3 hours. She made me photograph every planet individually. Jake's trophies are on the porch. He has 3 of them now. Biscuit the dog has dug 3 holes in the backyard that we have filled in twice and given up on. The 3rd one is basically his now. We had people over for a cookout last summer. Gerald from across the street, Carol from down the block, 2 families we did not even know a year ago. We sat outside until it got dark and nobody said anything about wind chimes. If you take nothing else from this story, take these 5 things: dates, times, photographs, emails, letters. Keep all of it. You may never need it. But if you do, you will be so grateful you started on day 1 and not month 14. Know the rules better than the person trying to use them against you. Understand what is actually written versus what someone says is the rule. There is often a significant difference. You are almost never the only one. Other people have experienced what you are experiencing. Other people have information you do not have, and other people can become allies when it matters. If an HOA enforces rules against some homeowners but not others, and you can document it, you may have a genuine legal claim. Look it up. Talk to a lawyer who specializes in HOA law in your state. Many offer free consultations. Board members are elected. Rules can be challenged. Complaints can be filed. You are not powerless, even when it feels like you are. Especially when it feels like you are. If you are in the middle of something like this right now, if you are getting the notices, if you feel like someone has decided to make your life difficult for reasons you cannot fully explain, I want you to hear this. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And you are not powerless. Document everything. Know your rights. Find your neighbors. And never let anyone make you feel like a stranger in your own home. Have your own HOA Karen story? Drop it in the comments below. Subscribe for new neighborhood nightmare stories every week.